Welcome to Editor's Choice, the podcast at EuroIntervention, where we highlight the latest science and research in interventional cardiology. I'm your host, Aaysha Cader, and through conversations with the authors, we explore study design, key findings, and their relevance in contemporary practice. I'm pleased to be joined by Professor Michael Joner from the TUM University Hospital German Heart Center in Munich, and we will be discussing the expert review paper on electrosurgical laceration and stabilisation of tricuspid edge-to-edge repair, the ELASTA-T Technique, just published in EuroIntervention. Welcome, Professor Joner.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you for being on the podcast. So, Professor Joner, the ELASTA-T technique was developed mainly as a solution for strategies to treat recurrent tricuspid valve regurgitation. Tell us a bit more about the issue of recurrent TVR and how ELASTA-T fits into this landscape of potential solutions.
Yeah, so the ELASTA-T technology or procedure was actually taken over from the mitral space, where the ELASTA clip procedure was first invented, let's say, and reported also, where you basically cut a edge-to-edge repair device from a mitral, most often from the anterior leaflet. So the same can be taken now to the tricuspid valve because actually, these kind of procedures, edge-to-edge repair procedures, become more and more common also in the tricuspid space. And what we know from the large randomized TriLuminate trial, but also from many registries, international registries that compared edge-to-edge repair to other technologies or against best medical treatment, we know that there is a significant number of patients ranging between 10 to 20% that actually have recurrent tricuspid regurgitation after 2 years. And that is seen consistently throughout these registries. And with that in mind, of course, it tells us that we need something different to treat these patients. We need to be able to develop methods that we can actually perform tricuspid valve replacement. And that is so important because otherwise, with a clip or a Pascal device, let's say, in place, it is extremely difficult to perform tricuspid valve replacement.
This manuscript provides a step-by-step guide to performing ELASTA-T. Let's start with the strategy and the principles behind this technique. Could you please outline that for our listeners?
Yes, sure. The strategy behind the ELASTA-T is really to enable transcatheter tricuspid valve implantation in the presence of edge-to-edge repair devices such as clips or Pascal devices, which would prevent passage and positioning of a transcatheter heart valve system in the tricuspid space if not being removed by this technology. So the principle behind it is to achieve a single device leaflet attachment of the edge-to-edge repair device, mostly at the septal leaflet. And we will discuss this probably in the next minutes to come, because the detached TEER device can then be pushed towards the septum or the posterior septal commissure.
Okay, and the manuscript also includes a section on the materials needed for this procedure. Would you walk us through the step-by-step aspects of the procedure, please, starting from patient preparation and access?
Yeah, so with regards to patient preparation, it is important that you can either start with both femoral sides, so you can use the right and left femoral vein, or you can have one large bore access using, for instance, a dry seal sheath, most often between 18 to 20 French, in order to facilitate access to both for both guiding sheaths. It's important you have a suture-based vascular closure device and system, and then what you also need is standard Chutkin's right or IM-shaped guiding catheters, either 6 or 7 French, that you know from regular coronary procedures, and also a multi-purpose guiding catheter, also 6 or 7 French. What you also require is a deflectable guiding sheath. Actually, you need 2 deflectable guiding sheaths because you want to engage through both orifices of the tricuspid valve. And you need a balloon wedge end-hold catheter, which is able to facilitate exchange to a standard coronary exchange wire. In addition, some more specific devices are snares. You need either gooseneck snare or a trilobe snare. We usually go with a 20 millimeter in diameter size snare device. And in addition, you also need microcatheters. In the past, we used to have piggyback wire exchange catheters, which are unfortunately no longer available in Europe. So these days you can use just standard CTO catheters such as Terumo Fine Cross, for instance. A very specific device is also the Asahi Astato XS20 coronary CTO guide wire, which is 300 centimeters long. And you also need your standard electrosurgery equipment, which is a pencil, of course, and the electrosurgery generator. Now, the patient is prepped in such that we usually do this under general anesthesia and TOE guiding, because you really need to be able to visualize everything well. You need a silent patient, not moving and shaking. So we do this in general anesthesia, but it could also be done in conscious sedation with ice guidance, for instance. As I had mentioned, you need 2 access sites on the femoral vein, or either having a large bore access, which could be an alternative. And importantly is that you have your angulations of the C-arm already set up, which can be done the day before when you have a CT scan available, which should be available because you already made your plans for the tricuspid valve replacement. In our specific case, this was an Evoke valve that was implanted, so we had all the pre-assessment, the angulations, to exactly know an unfast view and a lateral view with regards to your projections available.
All right. And after access and setup, the step of tricuspid valve passage has been very neatly described step by step in figure 2 of this manuscript. Could you describe the process for our listeners, please?
Sure. So it is essential that you engage the tricuspid valve, which now has 2 orifices because of the edge-to-edge repair device being centrally spaced. And you need to be able to engage it without entanglement with the subvalvular apparatus, including chordae, papillary muscles, etc. And for that purpose, you simply use 2 deflectable guiding sheaths, 1 for each orifice, and you engage through you traverse the tricuspid valve with the use of a balloon wedge catheter, which prevents you from being entangled into the subvalvular apparatus. After that, you exchange for a standard exchange wire, and with that in place, you can then insert your guiding catheters, as I had mentioned. One would be a multi-purpose, and the other side, more lateral to the attached clip, would be a JR or IM-shaped coronary guiding catheter. So it is important to note that you would only try to lacerate very centrally spaced edge-to-edge repair devices. This is extremely important. If they are already located in the commissures by default, then you don't need to go through all of this and you can just leave them in place.
All right. And wire snaring is subsequently described in the manuscript in figure 3, once again, very nicely. Could you walk us through the materials used for this step in the process and how it's done?
Yes, of course. So as I had mentioned before, you already have 2 guiding catheters in place. One is a multi-purpose. In our specific case was 7 French, through which we introduced a gooseneck snare, which was 20 millimeters in diameter. Through the other guiding catheter, which is a JR, Judkins Wright guiding catheter, 6 or 7 French, you have your Astato CTO wire in a fine cross microcatheter in place. So now you need to use your projections that you know from the CT assessment. Usually for an unfast assessment, this corresponds to an LAO cranial position of your angulation, and the lateral view usually corresponds to an RAO position of your C-arm. Now, with those 2 angulations, you actually frequently switch between the 2 angulations to make sure that your snare device is really capturing the Astato wire, and once you captured it, you actually snare it inside the multi-purpose and you lock it, making sure not to lose it again afterwards.
Okay. And the next step that's described in the paper is the flying V formation. You've spent a lot of time describing how to do it as well. Could you tell us how it's formed and why it's so important to create what you called a good flying V?
Yes, that is one of the critical steps indeed for all electrosurgery procedures. So what you do after you have snared the Astato wire, you actually pull back, you retrieve it into the multi-purpose catheter, and then you start forming your flying V, which is done with a scalpel, which is done with a blade of a scalpel with a sharp end of the blade. You first denude one 180 degrees of the circumference of the Aastato wire, which is usually located 1 to 2 centimeters outside of your adapter. And then you actually turn around your blade and you bend it to an angle of approximately 90 degrees, making sure that this flying V is securely formed. The reason why you only denude the innermost 180 degrees of the Aastato wire is that you want to have good insulation on the external side of the Aastato wire. And this is also the reason why you use dextrose infusion, and you also have a microcatheter in place, because you want to insulate as much and not want to have current go anywhere in the body, but only focal at the site of laceration.
Okay, and with an appropriately formed flying V, the next step is its delivery. What are the most important steps here?
Yeah, so in order to know where your flying V will be located, it is extremely important that you have your microcatheter very close to the flying V, let's say approximately 3 to 4 millimeters distant from the flying V, and you lock it there. You safely lock it in place so that it doesn't move anymore. In order to engage into the femoral vein and the adapter that is in place, you have to open the ventile basically to bring it in. And then you have two operators. One is gently pulling on the one side of the femoral vein, while the other operator is feeding the flying V into the multi-purpose catheter on the other side. And that is done in a very coordinated way, step by step, slowly. There's no need to rush. And the point when you start to see the flying V is actually denoted by your microcatheter, because this has a radiopark end, radiopark tip, and you can see this on fluoroscopy, and that tells you where your flying V will be located. So once you start seeing it coming out of your guiding catheter, you know that it's in place where it's supposed to be, close to the tricuspid septal leaflet.
Thank you for explaining that, Professor Joner. And for our readers, these are also explained in a very nice figurative format in the paper that you've just published. The last step, of course, is leaflet laceration, described in figure 5 of the paper. Could you walk us through this final important procedural aspect, please?
Yes, this is another critical step, certainly, because first of all, you should check. You should have a checklist available before you do the laceration, making sure that everything is connected. The pencil is connected to the electrosurgery generator. The electrodes should be in place, including the neutral electrode on the patient. And then what you do is basically you have to make sure that you cut the leaflet or you lacerate on the lateral side, not on the septal side. Again, remember that we want to leave the edge-to-edge repair device attached to the septal leaflet, where we can push it later on towards the septum or the septoposterior commissure. So once you've confirmed this, again, using your two angulation, most importantly using the unfast angulation, which clearly shows you if your flying V is placed lateral or more septal to the edge-to-edge repair device. You can maneuver the catheters such that you engage in a very lateral position. Once that is achieved, you need to fix everything securely in place. Fix your microcatheter, your guiding catheters, have everything in both hands basically, right and left hands, both catheters available, and you also connected your dextrose infusion. So you actually need 4 hands, or even better 6 hands sometimes, because 2 of your hands are pulling on the guide catheters when you're ready to lacerate, and you need 2 additional hands to perform the dextrose flushing. So that's the only critical step where you need good synchronization. And then for just 3 to 5 seconds, you push the yellow button, which is the pure cut mode of the electrosurgery pencil, at approximately 70 to 100 watts. And you cut for 3 to 5 seconds, and that should be visible immediately after the laceration.
And when leaflet laceration is successful and complete, what are the things you have to watch out for in terms of immediate follow-up?
Yeah, so this procedure should be regarded as a procedure to facilitate tricuspid valve replacement, which means that you should have your plan made up for performing this valve replacement. Usually you have, the team is in the room, is ready. The valve may be crimped already at this point in time, so that you can immediately start with a replacement procedure. Now, in the tricuspid space, it may not be that urgent and immediate as compared to the mitral, where you sometimes even have hemodynamic support available in the cath lab. It's not that urgent for tricuspid procedures where patients are oftentimes used to having, high-grade tricuspid regurgitation. But you should have everything just available in case there is a need that you need hemodynamic backup. Other than that, you just proceed with valve replacement and the procedure that you have planned.
Perfect. Professor Joner, thank you so much for simplifying a very complex procedural technique, which is the ELASTA technique. And these are, of course, very neatly described in your expert review manuscript with step-by-step figures. So thank you for this important podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Editor's Choice. To read the full article discussed in this episode, visit EuroIntervention.org. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to Editor's Choice for more conversations behind the science published in EuroIntervention.